Tears of the Kingdom is a game about exploration. Like Breath of the Wild, the newest Zelda installment finds its identity in the open world it presents and the sandbox of tools it gives you to explore that world. And beyond just journeying around the grounds of Hyrule, now we get to dive through its sky and into its deepest depths. The core experience of the game that everything else builds on is the open exploration of its world. Whether prompted by the main questlines or sidetracked by shrines, side quests, and core trials, the game plainly tells us to go and seek. It wants us to get lost in the lands of Hyrule while finding answers, solving puzzles, and building Zonai machines that more often than not don't work too well. This thread of discovery runs to the very DNA of the game, and because of this, I think there is one action every player should take, or at least try, during their playthrough of Tears of the Kingdom. Turn off your HUD. Now the game doesn't actually let you fully turn off the HUD, but there is a setting to turn your HUD to Pro mode. This setting removes most of the HUD most of the time, and some of it all of the time. You can still see important button prompts, your stamina bar when it depletes, and your hearts when you take damage. But beyond that, you don't get to see much else. No minimap or sensors, and no persistent objects in the screen's corners. All of these elements normally exist because they provide useful information to the player, but they can also take the player away from what's really important, the game world. These are somewhat meta phenomena that obviously don't exist fully in the game world itself. Link probably doesn't keep track of how he feels by the number of hearts he has left. No, the HUD elements are largely constructs designed for the player to tell the player how Link is feeling and to help with navigating the world. But because these are things outside of the game world itself, they can distract and even take away from the experience of playing the game and exploring its world. In terms of the actual HUD elements, minimaps have already been a big point of discussion in game analysis. The open world Zeldas aren't as prone to minimap dependency as some other open world games, but they still make it easy for a player to find themselves constantly glancing down to the minimap instead of navigating the actual terrain of the world. It's a tempting, ever-present crutch that is really easy to fall back on. And the other elements of the HUD that don't need constant monitoring can still cause issue too. They can become so ingrained that a player almost forgets they're there, but unfortunately their impact doesn't evaporate in the same way. Once you switch the HUD into Pro mode and those elements disappear, you realize just how big of a difference they make and how much their absence changes the feeling of walking around and exploring in-game. The first time I switched over, the lack of HUD let the feeling of the game come through with a new sense of vitality. It felt a lot more like freely being in Hyrule, just me as Link in the open world. No artificial gaming interface disrupting the flow between world and player. Now, I'm not here to say that it is always and for every person objectively better to play with Pro HUD. After all, Nintendo could still do a better job with the Pro setting. For example, it would be great to have an auto mode where more elements show up in combat when they're more necessary, but hide during quieter exploration. And beyond that, everyone is obviously going to have different preferences and proclivities that suit them and their playthroughs differently. There's no one way to play that would give a better experience for all players. That said, there are still some relatively objective aspects of playing a game that can lead to a better or worse experience with the medium. We can see this in other media really easily. For example, movies benefit from theaters with quality speakers and screens where moviegoers can focus on the full audiovisual spectacle of the film. Books are generally best enjoyed in a quiet, relatively peaceful setting that allows for deep concentration or focus on the words. And I think the same is true for experiencing games. While it may manifest in different ways, an engagement or immersion into the game is important for a player to really mesh with their player character and experience the feelings the game wishes to transmit. I think playing with Pro HUD will increase this immersion for most people, or it at least has the potential to. So I made this video to tell you to give it a shot. Maybe you'll like it. Maybe it will feel meh, but then you try playing the game for a while, getting familiar with it, and then try Pro HUD again. You'll be more comfortable with the game, so the lack of information the HUD provides won't be as much of a detriment, and you might notice a bigger difference in taking something away that has become a more core part of the lens through which you see the game. With it gone, the game might open up to you in an originally unexpected way. It might just be a breath of fresh air. And maybe you try all that, but you still don't care for it. Maybe you actually just want to always see your hearts or your temperature or some other element. And if so, fair to you. Obviously, I can't dictate the tastes of every player, but I think the experience of a clean screen exploration of this new and improved Hyrule is something pretty magical. And at the very least, I think it's worth a shot. As everyone explores and discovers this new behemoth of a game, I'll be around uploading videos on it. generally more lore and explanation than this one. My next might be explaining the ending, or talking about the secret stones. So make sure you stick around if something like that sounds interesting. And for my Elden Ring viewers, don't worry, Elden Ring content isn't gone, I'll be returning to it soon enough. So with that, thanks for watching, peace.